the Relaxed Running Podcast.
All right, brother. How long have you been in Japan for now, man?
So it's been just over a year. It was last September. I think I moved it. So yeah. It's been I feel like I've settled in now, like kind of got my routine. I know my way around Tokyo. So yeah, it's like it's going well.
I don't know when the video was recorded, but I watched one the other day. You were going for like a 30-kilometer lunch run, and you were talking about how you've got real entry level Japanese language skills. How's that part of it going? Because man, I'm in Australia, as I told you. I went to the UK for a couple of years, and I felt like even for a country that I thought was going to be on my exact wavelength with the same language. Um, there was so many things that I was like, oh, dude, we are different people. I can't imagine what it's like going from the UK to Japan.
Oh really? Because yeah, you always think I feel like Brits and Aussies are very similar. Or you think that culture wise and kind of sense of humor, that kind of thing. But then yeah, like Japan's just it couldn't be more different in terms of like everything. The language is just so foreign, like trying to pick up new words. They're just like random sounds. So it's like you hear a new word, 2 seconds later, I've completely forgotten it. So yeah, you need to hear it like 20 times before it slowly starts to sink in. So compared to like a French or Spanish, like one of the European languages, it's just a whole different ball game. So it's very slow progress.
So you spoke like no Japanese at all when you got there?
Yeah, I'd done like a 1 month intensive course before coming out. So it was just like the real basics, kind of I could probably order something in a cafe, maybe like, yeah, a convenience store, like super basic, like greetings type thing. And then did like a whole 1 year language course. So pretty much full time, like 30 hours a week. That's it. But even with that, like full time study, I'm now only just at sort of basic conversation level. Like there's no way I can express myself anywhere close to how I would in English.
Yeah. So what that was part of you being able to go there as well, wasn't it? Like you could go there for a certain amount of time if you committed to taking on board this course.
Yeah, that was it. It's unreal, this program, like this kind of fully funded scholarship program, which included the first part was this language course, like studying Japanese, and then like a work placement, which is what I'm on now. So yeah, the idea was that you kind of learn the language throughout that first year, and then you're able to like work here. But yeah, oh man, it's so difficult. I think as well, since stopping that language course, my Japanese has just got worse, or at least my like textbook style. Like I've done a lot more conversation, like chatting with people. 'Cause that's the fun bit. Like I want to just get a chat to people. But in terms of like studying the grammar, yeah, I'm definitely deteriorating.
Man, so what was like? There's so many little phrases that I feel I've picked up from you. I love your train harder, not smarter little motto when you get to your YouTube page. That made me laugh. But also, what was the other one I liked about you being the least talented athlete to ever go pro? That's the goal. So that was the mindset, was it? Like making that move to Japan? Because before we hit record, I was echoing something you said on one of your videos that when people think of the best marathon runners or distance runners in the world, often we think of the Africans. But like in terms of how many athletes within a population range are performing at a real high level of the marathon, it seems Japan is pretty hard to beat. So I mean, I understand it from that perspective as to why you would want to make the move. But how did you get to a point where you're like, all right, it's Japan for me. That's where I'm going.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I had the exact same mindset. Like I only knew about the East African runners. That's all you kind of see on TV and like hear about. You think they're the best in the world. It was only when, probably 2 years ago, I read this book about a British journalist who comes to Japan. And he'd already written a book about Kenya, about running in Kenya, like he'd lived there. It's
Oh, I've had him on the
Adharanan
show, man.
Shin.
I've had him on the
Oh,
show.
really?
Yeah, I
Oh,
forget his
awesome.
name, but I know the exact guy you're talking about.
Yeah. His book was quality. So it's literally through that book where he was talking all about the Japanese running scene and kind of comparing it to the UK and just the numbers. Like it was ridiculous. Like when you realize how deep they were, yeah, talking about like 2:10 marathon, that kind of elite level, that pro level, just getting like hundreds of guys under that when like the UK, we're getting maybe a few a year, a couple a year that can go sub 2:10. So it's just like for me, if I want to get good at the marathon, this it seemed like the place to be. And also it was kind of that mystery as well that I found interesting, that it was so different and there's so little published in English about it that when I was trying to research it before and like learn about it, it's near impossible. Like everything's in Japanese. So there's tons of stuff about their training, but it's all in Japanese. So with that language barrier, it's a nightmare trying to understand anything. So I was like, yeah, I need to experience this firsthand to make the move, head over.
Yeah, man. So you flew from London into Japan, and then, dude, explain that first couple of weeks. So had you got an established group that you were going to be going into? Like, how did you find your training partners and a place to stay? And I mean, there's so many different directions that we could take this conversation that it's kind of hard to pick one. But I think for me, like what fascinates me most is knowing about like the history of the marathon runners. I understand that like the focus on mileage and just full commitment to, you know, whatever it is that you do as a you know, a Japanese citizen. It's got your whole heart if you're focused. And I know the running world seems to be no exception. But as a bloke coming from the UK with what I would assume is a relatively similar training approach to what we use here in Australia and, you know, what so many athletes use in America, that first couple of weeks must have been a little bit of a shock to the system. Like, walk us through those first week or two.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of like the running, I'd done as much research as I could before coming to try and like, learn about their training. And probably for the 6 months before moving out, when I was back, so I graduated from a university in America, then was in the UK, and I pretty much kind of took the Japanese running approach and just did all my training solo. So I was sort of implementing that style already and just grinding out for sort of 6 months. Pretty rough, yeah, trying to do it all solo, banging out the 200, well, getting up to 220k a week, I think, by the end of the UK. So I was kind of on that the high mileage, train harder, not smarter approach already. So it wasn't actually a massive shock running wise. It was more the just the whole like cultural thing, that being in a place where the English level's non-existent. Like it's like no country I've been to before where it really is like people can barely string a few words together in English. You realise pretty quickly. It's like, yeah, I've got to put in a shift with this Japanese if I want to be able to communicate with anyone. And I headed out without. So actually, my original plan was I wanted to join the university team that I was going to be a part of, because they were like one of the best university teams in Japan, like serious high level. I'd say like 20 guys on the team that are sub 65 half marathoners. So like, yeah, it would have been unreal, but they had a no foreigner policy, which I found out when I got there. So I was like, yeah, I'd ran the entry standard. And then it basically just like, yeah, we don't want foreigners on the team. It's pretty traditional. Like some teams are way more flexible, but mine's like a very much like traditional uni. So I had to kind of ask around, like I had a few connections of foreigners that I knew who lived in Japan. And I was just asking all these kind of people like, yeah, what's the best team to train with? How do I get in a group? And pretty quickly, luckily found this, club teams. It's probably the best non-pro team or university team in Tokyo. And jumped in with those boys who at the time were a lot quicker than me, and just ended up getting dragged along through the sessions, which just helped so much. Like suddenly having a group, you just get pulled along, and the improvement was pretty quick after that.
Yeah. So you were saying that what was that turnaround between you? I can't remember if you said you left uni in the UK, but you said you ramped up your own training to symbolise what the Japanese athletes were doing. You're running 220k a week. But I mean, for so many athletes, just an increase in mileage like that would just lead pretty directly to stress fractures and injuries and niggles and things. Did you have to wrestle with any of that stuff, or you just built like an absolute machine?
Like a unit. Now, I'd say so I've got a background in mixed martial arts, like kickboxing, MMA. So it's a different kind of cross training, but I genuinely think that's what played a massive part. So actually, the build up's actually more uh, like extreme, I'd say, when you realize I was coming from, so I had to have 8 months off. I tore my hip, labrum, had to have surgery, like 8 months fully, no running at all. And so I was starting, it was March when I did my very first run. So literally starting from scratch. I was doing like a couple K a week. and then built from March to September, which is when I left. So about 6 months from 0 to 220k. So it was a pretty just linear, like every week add 10k. Like I'm not going to say try this at home. Yeah, anyone watching, definitely this isn't the smart approach. It's not the sensible way to do it. But I kind of just realized I'm going to have to take that risk if I want to go all in on the running. I was fully accepting that I could easily get injured. I could tear my hip again. I could all kind of stress fractures, injuries, but I'm willing to take that gamble. Basically, I've got nothing to lose at that point because I wasn't I was still not that quick, right? I was barely semi-elite. I don't know what you call it. I wasn't at all like a decent standard at that point. So I kind of see it as I've got nothing to lose here. Let's go all in it, push the mileage. And luckily, yeah, I managed to. There was obviously little aches and pains all the time, but I just kept running through them and nothing turned into like a major injury. So I never had to take time off.
Wow. And so how far into that program are you now? Like, has that been pretty consistent since March? Was it last year or March of this year?
So it was March last year. So what's it? So it's coming up to, it will nearly be 2 years now of running, kind of fully. So basically from that March, a year and a half, just over, that was when I fully focused on running, like stopped MMA, quit the MMA completely. And I've not had any injury since then. The torn hip was the last major thing. I've had maybe a couple days off here and there for like some a little like calf strain. But in terms of my bones and stuff, I think just from literally kicking the heavy bag for years, like kicking people's shins, bodies, all of that, getting kicked has just strengthened up my legs. So luckily, touch wood, there's no, risk of sort of stress fracture type things.
Because it is incredible, man. Like, I'd love to know what that correlation between MMA and running efficiency is, because obviously so many strength coaches that have come on here speak about the importance of, body weight exercise, and then at the right time of the year, mixing that with some heavier weight exercises, and just real functional movement is something that I've heard being spoken about a lot more amongst running and those sort of in and around the world of running. So it's so mind-boggling. Like I reckon if you put 100 people on a training program and said, all right, do this and see how long you last, like not many of them are going to last, but it's a ballsy move on your behalf to actually go, all right, let's just see what happens. And like, so walk us through the improvement, because if your body's able to handle that kind of mileage and you're doing that consistently, I can only imagine like the improvement from with a particular focus on the marathon's been a pretty steep improvement.
Yeah, it's pretty massive as well, from before when I was doing the MMA, I was always running, like I've loved running, but running wasn't the focus. I was maybe doing 10, 15k a day, like do that in the morning. Then I'd go to the MMA gym, put in 2, 3 hours there. So like when you stop that, and also I'm carrying at that point probably 15 kg of upper body muscle. So that's a huge correlation as well, that I've not touched a weight since, 2 years back. So just shedding like 15 kg of muscle that you kind of lug that round on a long run, like that's going to make a massive difference.
Yeah.
So losing that kind of muscle mass, picking up the running volume, it was basically just week on week, I could see the improvement. So it's pretty quick that even, back in the UK, I could tell every week I'm getting quicker, getting faster. And then that carried on into Japan basically, which is when I finally kind of raced after a long time off. And there was, this huge sort of improvement.
So in Australia, one of the you could pretty much point to a random athlete and assume that if they're a distance runner, there's a very good chance that on a Sunday they're doing a long run. Wednesday they've got a medium long run. Saturday is probably something easy. So is Monday, and then they're throwing a training session of some sort, maybe speed or something a little closer to lactate threshold, VO2 max, like that aerobic kind of session on like a Tuesday or a Thursday. And, most of the top runners here are probably doing between like 130 and 150K a week, whether they're sort of like a 10K runner or a marathon runner. Obviously, there's exceptions to that rule, but that seems fairly universal in terms of structure. Like in Japan, what is the week? How are you getting 220Ks worth of running into a week? And is there as much of a focus on intensity during the midweek sessions?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a little different. So probably I'd say I've got a hybrid of that Western style training and the Japanese style, because the guys that are on the same mileage as me, putting in, yeah, like 250K a week, the only other guys doing that are the pro runners who are on these corporate teams like full time. So all of the amateur guys, the club runners, tend to be on maybe 150 to 200K a week. Still pretty high, but because they're working full time jobs, it's a lot harder then to squeeze it in. Um, but the sort of standard stuff would be like a Wednesday hard session. So usually 10K pace. So classics would be like 10 by K.
Yeah.
The idea of like threshold training just doesn't exist here. Like maybe some teams have started doing it recently, but it's pretty much very much old school, like absolutely hammer the session. You're dead by the end. Yeah. 10 by K, like close to flat out. Yeah. Absolutely ripping the last rep. Um, and then the Saturday session would be like your longer one, so your marathon type, maybe half marathon pace. A lot of, I think definitely the European style. I think it's maybe the same in Australia for marathon training. Would you do intervals, like long intervals at marathon pace? So maybe like 5 by 5K at marathon, 4 by 6K, sort of, yeah, extended.
Yeah, there's certain
Um,
variations of sessions like that for sure. Yeah.
Whereas they here, they've never seemed to do intervals. It's always just long tempos. So it might be 30K at little slower than marathon pace, or 40K um, at sort of, yeah, 95% marathon pace. So it's always a little slower, and basically it's extending the distance, no rest, no recovery on these little tiny loops. So around a 1K loop, like I've hit out sort of 45K runs around this 1K loop. Everyone just in a train, taking a lap each, head to the back. Another guy steps up, takes a lap. So it's like super disciplined, like formulaic. Um, and yeah, they love the sort of long, grindy volume, those type sessions.
Yeah. And are you structuring it like that because, did you say, are you in Tokyo?
Yeah, Tokyo. Yeah.
Yeah. And is that just sort of like a geographical thing? Like your only other option is to cut laps of the city? Are you limited for options in terms of where you can run? Is that why you sort of, because I've seen a couple of your videos where you guys all meet up at a park and you've got variations of different sessions, but I haven't seen that 1K loop one. That sounds absolutely brutal for 40K or 30K, or to be honest, even 5K.
Yeah. The mental training is horrendous. The actually that thing, so the 1K loop, they've shut it down at the moment. There's like construction on it, so we've had to change it up, hit a 2K loop, which isn't massively more thrilling, but uh, yeah, the problem with Tokyo, it's so crowded, so busy, and there's not loads of like big parks or sort of open spaces. I think London's way better for running. Like that's where I'm from. And I've heard Melbourne's got a great, yeah, running scene as well. It looks like you've got some pretty good places. Um, but Tokyo's tough. So you end up doing these tiny loops. Or if I'm doing a long run, I'll get a train out to the river. So head out sort of half an hour, because then you can get these long interrupted runs. Because otherwise in the city centre, it's just traffic lights everywhere, stop signs, people. So that's why they end up doing these loops.
Yeah, that makes sense. Man, you're right. Like, there's definitely a correlation between London and the parks here in Melbourne. I think London is Melbourne on steroids in terms of options, but the amount of laps I did of Hampstead Heath when I was living there, we were in a
Oh,
little place called Tufnell Park, just slightly north of London. And yeah, whenever I was going to run, I would go out and, I'd cut some kind of a lap of Hampstead. And then my wife and I would go and do like Saturday morning sprints up a Hampstead hill. But I know I think it's Richmond Park, and even in Teddington and things, like I know a lot of athletes from Australia will go and train there, and I'll just see Instagram photos of the parks that they're training on. It seems beautiful, like in London as a whole, but then even greater London. Yeah, man, like that's what I thought. When you think of Tokyo, I think of a real hustling, bustling city. But yeah, you're right. Like you mentioned the word discipline before, and structure with the way those sessions are actually, sort of targeted. Like, is that a real standout point? Because I think if one thing that sort of comes to mind about the Japanese as a culture is just their obsession with quality and their obsession with probably discipline. So from a running perspective, outside of just the way they structure that session, 1K loop, one person leads a lap, what does that that discipline approach look like from what you've seen so far?
Yeah, it's so my team, they're not a pro team. So I'd say they're probably a lot more relaxed. So actually, since spending time here and seeing how I spent some time, in this high altitude place where I saw loads of the pro teams, and I thought my team was like super disciplined, structured, but ours seemed like casual compared to how just the way I describe it is that I think Western runners, there's a lot more emphasis on having fun, like enjoying it. It's way more casual. Like your relationship with your coach is often they're a friend as well as a coach. They're not like this master that you kind of there's this big power divide. Whereas here it's way more like so before the session, for example, if you see one of the teams, the coach will be in the middle, everyone will be standing in like a perfect semicircle, hands by their side, dead silent, and almost like the coach is like lecturing them, and then they're all in unison be like, thank you very much. Like all these like set phrases, like almost, honoring the master, the coach. And it's way more, it's not like a conversation, like exchange. It's this weird sort of dynamic, which is just very Japanese. And the same with the actual sessions themselves. It's perfect, like pacing. So on this loop, they know every 100-meter split, around the loop. So it means that the pacing's just like bang on. If we're meant to be running 3:05 per K, it will be 3:04 to 3:06 every single split. The same with like a long run, like if it's these 45K long runs, it will be within a couple seconds every single lap, like no variation whatsoever. And it's just as well, like the timings of you start the session at 6:30. There's no like messing around before then. It's on the dot of 6:30. If you're a minute late, you've missed the start. So it's just super disciplined, like military type style.
Well, and how have you found adjusting to that? You were probably better prepared than most Westerners, just through way of, sort of researching it a little bit more, but it'd still be a little bit of a shock to the system. Because my biggest problem is I'm such a shit talker. Sometimes
Yeah.
I'll go out and I'll banter. And when you're explaining the difference between coaches, like I coach a lot of athletes over here. And one thing I notice is that every phone call, it's like a fun conversation. Like I'll say, if you're not challenging me, I'll be asking, like, why aren't you challenging me? Because you don't just want to take this because I said it. Like, I want your feedback. And I also find that really valuable sometimes, because from time to time I'll get feedback and I'm like, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know where you were, or like mentally or physically or whatever. So it gives you an opportunity to adjust. It might be volume, or it might be intensity, or even race plans, or I mean, there's so many variables that you can address. But is that something you feel that athletes miss? Because I've actually heard this about Asian cultures before, is that like because of the absolute honor and respect they have for people in positions of power, or perceived positions of power above them, they find it very hard to criticize or question anything that they're told.
Yeah, there's when I was when I was living in for a month in this altitude training place, and like speaking with a lot of the pro runners and stuff, and I was telling them about how I make my own training, like, 'cause I'm self-coached, like I create the whole sessions, everything, and that just kind of blew their mind. They just couldn't comprehend, because they'd never in the 25, 30 years they've been they're all mid-20s, 30s, they'd never once made a session themselves. It'd always been set by the coach, and they'd not really had any impact on it or thought, I think, massively about maybe why they were doing it. It was just, that's what the coach has said, so that's what we're doing. Um, so it's definitely, like a very different mindset, I think. I do miss the sort of, just like exactly like shit talk on a run. I remember when like the first one of these long tempos, maybe like a 30K, I'm like, oh, that sounds rough around a 1K loop. And then we start the watch. I'm like, all right, well, at least we'll have a little chat while we're going, because it wasn't a super aggressive pace. And it's sort of dead silent. I'm sort of looking around like, okay, is it going to be like this for the whole 2 hours? And then, it just genuinely is. So just 2 hours, dead silent, not one word said. Um, but I think I have just got used to it now. Just that seems very normal. Um, and then after the session, we'll have like a good chat and stuff. Like on the warm down, everyone's like, there'll be banter and stuff. But when it's focused like training time, that is super locked in. Like, there's very much a difference.
Yeah, there's almost a nice part of that, like the idea of just being able to focus completely on the session and people not being like, "Oh man, like Jake's a little quiet today, or he seems a little out of sorts." Like it's just, it'd
Yeah.
be nice just to be able to get out there and get it done. I had a friend that I do stand up comedy with here in Melbourne who spent 3 months in Japan just earlier this year, and he's a self-professed fat guy. Like he says that he's way overweight, and I mean he's probably 20 or 30 kilos overweight. And he goes, mate, like these are his words. He goes, mate, as a fat bloke getting to London, getting to Japan, it blew my mind how out of sorts I felt. Like I got off the plane, I'm like, oh, everyone is trim and fit. And he said that just through way of eating the food that they provide over there, he said it was all so clean, so well prepared that even if you went into like a 7-Eleven, they didn't just have 2-week-old donuts that you could take.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the diet side of thing is something that really fascinates me because it's something I constantly hear about Japan is just the cleanliness of the food, like how well prepared it is, how high quality it is. Um, is the preparation, like the carb uh, fueling for some of these longer sessions and races, pretty similar in terms of what people are eating, or are they still really focused on making sure like there's gels and powders and whatever else to help top up that fueling process?
They do the gels mid session, so that's all pretty similar. But yeah, it's how clean everything is. As well, I came from America doing my masters there to then not long after in Japan, and it's just complete opposite. Like you realize how horrendous the American diet is. So then coming over here, and it's like it's the amount of nothing's processed. So I mean, you can get they obviously do some like fast food and stuff here, but most people, because it's so cheap, you can eat decent quality food, that's like fresh. I couldn't believe how cheap everything was compared to London, or like America. And then, yeah, you can get these like a very good meal, like veg, meat, rice, like tastes good as well. And it's not got all the processed like added stuff in. And like, yeah, the convenience stores, you can get like a good solid meal in like a convenience store, which, yeah, back home, it's the most, like, the worst kind of stuff there. Like, you're not getting proper food. And they're on every corner, these convenience stores. So I think it's just probably a lot easier, yeah, to eat clean.
And are you living by yourself there, or are you living with teammates?
I'm solo, yeah. So I've just got a little apartment, like, close to central Tokyo. And then the team that I train with are all sort of close-ish, so all, yeah, in that central Tokyo area. But I do kind of miss the team atmosphere. Like when I was in America, I was, on a running team, and the same in the UK. From undergrad, I lived with runners for like 4 or 5 years. That's probably the biggest thing. I love just the atmosphere, like always hanging out with your mates, basically living with them. So it's a little different.
Yeah. So where are you at in terms of performance now, man? So obviously marathon has your heart and soul for the time being. That's your big focus. Where are you at? Where are you trying to get to? And I mean, I can ask this in a minute because there's a lot coming at you at once. But the other thing I'm interested in is if you had the opportunity to run pro with a team over there, is that something you would consider staying on and doing?
Yeah, I've been asked this a bit recently. It's a hard one. There's a few things. So with the pro teams, if I was Japanese, that might be possible. Like with my marathon time, if I took a couple minutes off my marathon, then yeah, I'd probably be at the level where I could join a team. But as a foreigner, they can only have one foreigner on each team, and they're limited. So on the relay races, that's what's super popular here. That's why the teams basically sponsor people and like pay all this money is to have you run these relays. The foreigners get put on the shortest leg. And so every team pretty much has a world class Kenyan runner, like a ton of Olympians, like world champ runners. Like it's ridiculous. So I think just for me to get on a team, I'd have to be like a 27 mid 10K runner. Pretty much I'd have to be the best 10K runner in the UK just to get onto a team. So like the level's insane out here because of there's so many Kenyans here pretty much. Um
Is
and I think just yeah, from like learning more about the teams and like seeing their training, I don't know whether it's too formulaic for me. I like that freedom, especially since I've been coaching myself forever. I feel like I know what works for me from what doesn't, from just experimenting with different things. Whereas with them, it's very much they set the program, everyone does it. There's not a lot of individuality, I think. So yeah, it's a tough one. I want to train with people, but maybe not have that much controlling, like team sort of nature.
Yeah, sure. So you said like if you'd have to take, I don't know, what have you run for 10K?
Oh, 29, 30.
Oh wow, man. Okay, yeah, okay. So that's a solid time. It's so
Yeah,
funny.
not in Japan. It's not.
Yeah, yeah, is that right? So in Japan, it's funny because in Australia, obviously the population of Australia you can't even compare to the population of Japan. But I mean, 29, 30, you run that. You've got a couple of athletes who are sort of running sub 28, and then old guess that like 29, 30 would have you in the top 30 runners in Australia. So it's crazy to hear that a time like that, well, it doesn't even really register in Japan.
Yeah, it's as well the shorter distances. People just don't care about so much. It's like no one seems to ask, "Oh, what's your 10K?" It's always what's your half marathon or your marathon. The track running's so low key here in comparison to road running. It's all about the roads and the Ekiden, these relays. So it's almost that's what's important. Unless, I guess, yeah, unless you're a foreigner, because that's the distance you have to run in these relays. So it changes a little bit. That's why, yeah, these Kenyans are just so rapid, like over the shorter stuff.
Yeah, so you get like a top level road runner, man, and this shows my lack of knowledge on just the Japanese running scene at all because I couldn't tell you who the best Japanese marathon runner is. But the best Japanese marathon runner in Japan is he a celebrity? Like, does he walk down the street and people are like, "Oh my gosh"?
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, so probably the most famous guy, Suguru Osako. He was the guy who spent time with the Oregon Project in America. So he's one of the only guys that kind of gone abroad, basically. Um, and he used to have the Japanese record. He's ridiculously famous. He actually trains when he's in Japan. A lot of time he's in America, but he trains at the park that I'm at. So the ones you've seen in the videos. And so I've run past him a lot, like seen him often. And people will definitely, everyone, when you see him go past, people are like, oh, Osaka. Like people, yeah, go crazy. And like at rate, I've seen him. He's been like a guest runner at one of the races I was at, and he's getting like mobbed at the start. And then there's all these like Q&As after, like he's queuing up for hours to take photos. And it's the same with even the university runners that run in this the massive relay race at the start of the year. It's like the biggest event here. You get 50, 60 million people watching it. So like half the country. And after that, they're, yeah, literally celebrities. Like they'll be on talk shows and TV. Like at any race, there's like queues of girls lining up to like get autographs and pictures with these guys from the uni team. So it's hilarious.
Man, that's amazing. Like, what other sports would be on the same kind of profile level as distance runners? What's big in like baseball?
Yeah, the biggest one's baseball. So it's like baseball and then soccer, football. Um, they're pretty big. Yeah, baseball's massive. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's amazing. So, where are you at in terms of your half marathon and your marathon time now? And how much time have you taken off over the last 18 months or nearly 2 years?
Yes, I went to Japan with a half marathon best of 72 minutes. And my marathon, I've done one marathon in America, kind of while I was training MMA, did 2:38, I think. So then I got down 2:17 marathon. Actually in Gold Coast, Australia, that was yeah my first like, proper marathon. So that was pretty cool this year.
I've
And
just got
then
I've
60.
just got my entry for next year, 2025.
Oh, sick.
That'll be my second marathon. Yeah.
Oh, it's a good race, great fun, like nice and flat, good weather. Yeah, I'd recommend.
Sorry, man, I
Um,
interrupted you. And then your half marathon,
yeah, no problem. The half 65,
dude.
27.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, taking a fair bit off, but hopefully there's a fair bit more to come still.
Sure. And have you got your eyes on any particular marathons at the moment?
Yeah. So the next one I've just entered actually is Tokyo Marathon. So that's March. Um, so yeah, that will be the next kind of big goal. I'm like planning out the sort of training block towards that. It's not too long. We've only got just under 3 months now. Um, so that will be the big focus in the build up. I'm trying to hit a 10K and a half as well. Try and like get a little bit more speed in, beforehand to then, yeah, go all in on the marathon.
Interesting, man. So from where you're at now, so what are we? We are sort of mid-December, 3.5 months till Tokyo Marathon. like how much does training change for you? Because obviously your base mileage is pretty huge. So are you ramping that up even more, or what do you adjust as you get closer to race day?
Yeah, so with this one, the mileage will probably, if anything, come down a tiny bit just because I want to taper a little bit for these 10K and the half marathon. Like usually I just train for everything, but I think I'm going to specifically try and PB. But actually so at the moment for this next block, I've been reading this Japanese book about, so in the sort of 90s and 80s, the best runners in the world for the marathon were Japanese, like before the Kenyans and Ethiopians like took over. Yeah, pretty much the Japanese were the best. And it's so interesting, like reading their training. And because in this book, it details like literally every day, the 3 months leading up to their sort of target race. It's got a whole load of sort of different marathoners in it. But at the time, this is before super shoes and everything. They're running 2:08 for the marathon, which at the time was like, yeah, I think that's, or a few of them ran the world record at points. So that was like the elite level. And so I've just been kind of, for this next block, I want to really go in on that Japanese style and implement a bit more of their specific training that they think was the reason they'd ran those like world best times. So it's kind of, yeah, I'm basing it on that Japanese style this time.
That's really cool, man. And outside of the running, are the athletes over there doing much in the gym or cross training or stretching and things like that? What does the stuff away from the training track look like?
So there's no or very little weights. I think Western athletes prioritize more like gym work, but they do a lot of the drills. It's a bit like the Kenyan style. If you've seen like the Kenyan drills, they'll do before training always the same sort of drill exercises. They do a fair bit of core sort of strength and conditioning. Yeah, it's less, which more body weight stuff, and to do with running economy, trying to improve that, improve the sort of, yeah, the strength. So they do quite a bit of that, and lots of like recovery stuff just aimed on, yeah, maximizing that recovery. And cross training, they don't do that. Like if someone's injured, I've never seen anyone do biking or swimming or the sort of standard stuff you'll get on the elliptical. I've never seen that. It's always, they just go for really long walks, but almost like power walks. You know, you see the sort of speed walkers. The runners will do that. So it's not just like a casual stroll in the park. They'll have like the arms and stuff and the power walking hip things going. So they treat that, I guess, as a training session almost. You go out for like hours and hours of long walks. Yeah, it's funny to watch.
Have you heard of an American guy called David Roach?
Yeah, the name rings a bell.
Yeah, man. So he's like an ultra marathon runner. He's been a coach for years, from what I understand. I think he's 36, but he won an ultra marathon earlier this year called the Leadville 100, like a 100-mile
Uh,
race. And he broke the record that was called like the unbreakable record for that particular course by like 18 minutes or 15 minutes. And I think it was 18 minutes he took off it. And it was really fascinating, man, because his whole philosophy, like I went to his page and I was excited to hear about all these big miles, but his whole philosophy was like high mileage sucks, which is obviously very subjective. But to boil down into that, like obviously there's exceptions to the rule with people like yourself who can manage that kind of mileage, and I mean the results speak for itself. It's pretty incredible. But with him, he's probably for a 100-mile runner, he's doing, I think, between like 100 and 120K a week. And people are just staggered about how it is that he's sort of performing at the level he is. But a big part of what he's doing is cross training. When we hang up, I'll send you the link, because I listened to an episode with him and Rich Roll the other day, and it was just there's just like a whole heap of food for thought, because it just completely tipped my what I thought I knew on its head. And just I think it's exciting because it's just sort of a little bit unheard of. Do you know what I mean? Kind of if you had a spectrum, your approach is here, his
yeah.
approach is there. Both seem to be working well. Yeah, so it's really interesting. It sounds like the Japanese approach is very much like, and correct me if I'm wrong, man. This is just standing back and observing. It's like, all right, we're gonna throw this at the wall, and whoever sticks, we're gonna dominate, essentially.
Yeah, oh, definitely. It's 100% that. There's so many people involved in running, and it kind of just funnels up in that a few, like people drop off as it goes from high school into uni, and then from uni into the pro teams. You get less and less people. I guess people burn out just from years of like the absolutely brutal training, or they get injured. Like, so yeah, it's not like the safest approach. I think how they're absolutely hammering it, because they smash the mileage from young. Like, that was the biggest thing that I've noticed. You got from like 14, 15 years old, they're doubling almost every day, like 2 runs every day. Um, and pretty much, yeah, it seems like training like pros effectively. Uh, so that, I think that's why a lot of them just, yeah, hit early 20s, and they've maxed out. Like, yeah, look, you see a lot of their PBs, their best times are from pretty young, or like during their university days, and then they might not get quicker. So it's kind of the few that do break through run very, very well. But yeah, loads of people are just absolutely gone, like wiped out.
Man, interestingly, actually, David Rhodes, the bloke I just mentioned, his background was in NFL. So you look back at him from 20 years ago, and dude, the guy was jacked. Like, you look at his upper body, and he looked like he could absolutely dominate most people in a gym. And you look at him now, and you go, actually, just today he posted a photo of like what he looked like 20 years ago compared to today. And I mean, he was definitely more intimidating 20 years ago. But I wonder how much that approach in the sport had. That like that MMA effect that you were speaking about earlier has had an impact on what he does. Are you guys doing much? Is it by heart rate? Like, you're looking at heart rate monitors? Because I know that data has become quite big in the West, and a lot of athletes it's very rare to see someone without a heart rate strap on.
Yeah, that's not quite reached Japan yet. And that's kind of the way with everything in Japan. It's if something's done a certain way, changing that is near impossible. Like, through anything, like it's just, this isn't just in sport, but yeah, it translates over to running, that they train pretty much the way they did 20, 30 years ago. So that I've not seen anyone use a heart rate monitor. It's all done on just paces in training. So it's like, if we go in targeting a certain pace, we'll just run at that pace until we drop. Like, so if someone can't hack it, they'll just drop out after 6 reps, whatever, or they'll miss a lap and then jump back in. So there's no like altering a session on the go based on how you're feeling, or yeah, what your heart rate's saying. It's very much just get it done, whatever at whatever cost. It's that train harder, not a smarter approach.
Yeah, I love it, man. What's the take on, so obviously for everyone listening, if you haven't seen it already, I discovered you through your YouTube channel. What's the take? Because I'll get the camera out on myself for my YouTube channel here quite a lot in Australia, and people will turn their head and be like, mate, what do you, in fact, I got some footage of a session I did this morning, and I was on quite a busy path, and the amount of 60-year-old blokes who walk past, like giving the camera daggers, just it sort of blew my mind. Like, what's the response to like the YouTube vlogging of the training and everything over there? Do you get much crap, or are people pretty respectful?
They're pretty chill, yeah. I think that actually there's loads of pretty big running YouTubers here, like Japanese guys who are doing it for the Japanese audience. Pretty popular, so yeah, all the races, you'll see them with the head cam things and like vlogging before, and they're basically the most popular runners in Japan. Like, the corporate, like the pro runners, they're the quickest, obviously, by far, but actually the guys getting a lot of the sponsorships from brands are these running YouTubers who just have this massive like social media presence. So they've probably got a bigger audience. Yeah, a lot of people want to get pictures and stuff with them. So yeah, I've not caught any shit before. I've been filming in, yeah, little races sessions, and it's all good.
How does it go? Like, because one thing I've noticed, I until recently, because I've kind of started flirting with the idea of maybe vlogging my journey towards Gold Coast. Like, I've kind of got my eyes in the next couple of years. I was more a track runner. First I want to target 229. Well, first I want to break 240, in fairness, and then eventually I've got like a podcast series that's called Chasing 229, which maybe by the end of 2026, hopefully I can reach. But as a part of that, like just this morning, I started to go out and get some B-roll, and it's like a kind of a different mindset, because you're like, all right, I want this to look good, and I also need to focus on my session. So there's like a couple
Yeah.
of weird dynamics I've noticed. How do you go with that?
Yeah, it was the same sort of thing that I was weighing up before, because the goal always is performance. It's, and that's the end goal. The YouTube's there in my eyes to support the running. If I can get sponsored, get brand deals and stuff through YouTube, it just allows me to focus everything on the running. It means I don't need to get a 9 to 5 job sat in an office. It's just like my worst nightmare. I want to be out there running. That's what I love. So with the training, I just want to make sure it's not impacting the running. So the approach I'm trying to do with all the videos is just keep it as unstructured as possible, more just very authentic. Like if I'm going somewhere, if I'm going to race, bring the camera and I'm filming. And then if it's a target race, so like a marathon, I'm actually trying to PB in, I'm leaving the camera at home. Like I'm not messing around mid race with taking footage, because it definitely does take away from performance. Like if you're trying to absolutely give it everything. But if it's a race where I'm using it as a training effort, which is a lot of the races on my YouTube I've done, using them as like training runs effectively, then it's fine. I can bring out the camera and it's not a distraction massively. It means I can get a bit of footage as well people find interesting. But a lot of it's, I'm filming my daily life as well. It's not always running. So I've tried to make it, a lot of it's just chatting to the camera, vlogging wherever I'm going. So that kind of thing, it's not really taken away from the running as such. Because that's definitely the thing. I don't want to become a YouTube influencer. I want to be a runner who does YouTube, is the kind of angle.
Yeah, interesting, man. No, that's awesome. It's so interesting. I mean, it's such a new art form for so many people who start vlogging. I had Ali Ostranger, or however you say her name.
Oh yeah.
The American girl. She's like
Yeah, really popular.
yeah, like she's really fun and really quirky, and I've started to watch a few of her videos. But yeah, I'm always interested about that headspace, because for me, I'm probably that personality where I'll go, okay, if I want to do this, I want to do it like the best. I want to be the best at,
Yeah.
and then it's like, well, you can't do 15 different things and be the best at all of them. Like you have to focus on one. But
Yeah.
I think it stands out to me is yeah, I like the way your videos are shot. So I was wondering how much of a stress that was, but it sounds like it's something you've found a really nice balance for.
Yes, the editing part that takes forever. The filming bit's pretty easy. Like I'll plan a video around a topic each week. There'll be a main overarching theme. Like I'll come up with the title and the thumbnail maybe first, based on maybe it's a race I'm doing that week, or if it's like a really high volume week or a specific session, it will be based on that. And then when I'm bringing the camera, it's just like I'm chatting to a friend or something. That there's not a lot of planning that goes in. It's kind of freestyle in the chat. But then yeah, when you've got all that footage, then trying to make a story out of it through the editing side to keep it interesting, like adding all the cuts in, the overlays, the graphics. That's when it takes ages. So that yeah, the dream would be to get to a point where I can outsource the editing, send it off to someone, get if I'd love as well to get the videos subtitled in Japanese, so I could also hit that Japanese audience, because I think I'm like 5% of my viewers are Japanese. So it's tiny, just because no one speaks English, so like they just wouldn't have a clue what I'm saying.
Man, you
But
could probably like it's not, I don't know if you've been on the Fiverr website at all. Like I know it's probably more difficult because a lot of my YouTube videos are kind of instructional, like 90% of them have been that. And so one thing I've started to do recently for the exact same reason is because I'm like, I'm bad at this and it takes me forever, is I pay a guy like maybe 40 or $50 on a like just each week, and he just does it for me, but it saves about 5 hours of my week. So like
yeah,
there's good options that are not overly expensive. If if you wanted to check that out, it's been really helpful to me.
yeah, it's a good shout. No, it's something that I definitely want to do. Find someone. It's as well. It's losing the or accepting that someone else can do it. At the moment, I'm so like, oh, I want it done my way. It's super like
And
perfectionist.
yeah, I struggle with that a little bit as well. In fact, I had a couple of people trying to, because I suck at social media. I've got no interest in it. But yeah, and I started to try and get some people to do it. But I think with the amount that I was paying, they had like 15 people they were helping, and I was doing a better job than what they were. So I know exactly what you mean. So I'm kind of
Yeah.
back trying to do stuff consistently now. But yeah, man, it's interesting to hear you say that. It sounds like we're juggling the same kind of thing, which is cool. Have you had much interest from sponsors and things on your channel? Because I see, am I making up? Is it like nearly 30,000 people are following along on YouTube at the moment?
Yeah, yes. I'm amazed how quickly people have got behind it. There's a fair few brands that I've just turned down so far. I think what the thing is keeping that balance. What a lot of the viewers and like comments and messages that I get is that people love how authentic I think it is. I think there's a lot of maybe channels out there that you can tell it's just an easy cash grab. Like they're taking a sponsor that there's no way they're using that product. Like this is complete bullshit here, but it's just like easy money. Try and push it to their viewers. So I definitely, if I'm taking a brand, it's something that I genuinely use their product. And it's got to naturally be able to work it into a video without it just seeming like a sponsored read type thing. So
For sure.
there's a couple brands that I'm chatting with at the moment that, yeah, it's looking promising, I'd say.
Oh, that's exciting, man. Dude, I'm a big fan. I was really looking forward to catching up and picking your brain, and I'm pumped to keep following along on that journey, man. It's really cool what you're doing, and yeah, I wonder, like, what you reckon if you had your best day out, what do you think you're capable of for the marathon at the moment?
Oh, funny, I actually got just asked that. So in this week's video, this Sunday, I answered a question about that. I reckon the dream is to go sub 210. That would be the ultimate goal. I mean, I have no idea. Maybe I hit my wall, just my talent limit before then. But I guess I won't know really. That's why I'm sort of going all in with it, is I want to see how far I can get. But I'd say that's not out the question. You
Awesome.
never know with, how much more I can go, but that would be unreal. The
Oh,
210
exciting.
barrier.
All right, brother. No, I'll keep my eyes on it. Man, you're a legend. Thanks again for coming on, brother. Appreciate it.
Oh, cheers, man. It's been a great little chat. So yeah, thanks, mate.